It's time for our weekly weather discussion with Nebraska Extension's Eric Hunt, who joins us every Monday morning. Eric, thanks so much for joining us. A lot of Nebraskans yet again seeing some significant moisture across the state. Bring us up to speed on what we've seen and what might be in the week ahead.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Alex. We've definitely had some pretty beneficial moisture across the state in the last 7 to 14 days. Some places probably go back a little bit longer than that with regards to getting some good moisture. But I would probably caution that for a lot of places, particularly in south central and eastern Nebraska, or kind of our core corn, soybean producing areas, the moisture's been good, but we still have deficits going back through the early spring. And 1 week of hot, dry weather, and we'll pretty much offset anything we've gained here in the last week or so. Meaning that we've kicked that drought can down the road, but we certainly have not eliminated that risk. And we'll need the rains to kind of keep coming pretty regularly for the remainder of the summer, I think, to stave off any major drought pressures.
Okay, so what we saw in the last, let's call it 14 days for most of the state, did that scenario improve our drought conditions here?
It did, yes. And if you look at the drought monitor, there were quite a bit of improvements last week and the week before. So you've had about 2 straight weeks where we've seen quite a few areas get 1 category improvements. So we still have a majority of the state in drought, but we at least now have portions of the state, particularly across portions of northeastern Nebraska, are now just in that abnormally dryness region, which is kind of drought purgatory. And then we've seen a pretty big reduction in the area of severe drought across the state, which is great news, particularly across portions of the sandhills. We've really actually had some very beneficial moisture across portions of the sandhills and are running some, I would say, mild surpluses going back to the beginning of the growing season. And we've even seen some meaningful precipitation in portions of the panhandle where you now have, I believe we actually have seen all the extreme drought eliminated from the state, at least for the time being. But, again, we have a couple weeks of no precipitation and very warm temperatures. We'll see those soil moisture percentiles go pretty far back down again. We'll start seeing some stresses start showing back up on pastures and crops. They're just basically saying that recovery right now at this point is still relatively fragile, and if the rain shuts off, those gains will be offset pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Okay, the week ahead, you said heat is on. What kind of heat can we expect?
Yeah, by heat, I mean just more seasonal temperatures. I think it'll be pretty warm on Wednesday across a lot of the state, particularly southern eastern sections. I think we have a pretty good chance of getting at least to 90, maybe low 90s for a lot of places. Western side of the state, maybe just slightly cooler. But today should be relatively pleasant, 70s for the most part, and relatively cool tomorrow morning, especially across the eastern 1/3 to half of the state. A lot of places will probably drop well into the 50s, maybe in the upper 40s. We'll see temperatures turn back up pretty quickly tomorrow. Warm Wednesday. And I think we're going to have a boundary kind of get into the northern part of the state by Wednesday night into Thursday. That should actually lead to pretty good chance of showers and thunderstorms, at least across the north central and northeastern section of the state, particularly kind of along and north of Highway 20, maybe even getting a little bit further south than that. And then after that, I think we should see temperatures probably back off just slightly from Wednesday's levels, but still probably at or maybe just slightly above seasonal levels in the mid 80s. And I would say at this point, that's a good thing. We have actually been relatively cool across the state, and most of this region here in the last, I would say, 2 to 3 weeks. So we're not well short on heat accumulation or heat units to this point, but we are definitely running a little short where we'd like to be. We'd like to get that crop going because the faster growth you can get in June, the earlier we get into the reproductive stages of crops, and we kind of get that reproductive stage started before we hit our climatological peak of heating, which usually is kind of last part of July and into August around this part of the country.
Sure. Okay. How about let's round it out with this. The longer range forecast for moisture chances as we really ramp up the growing season. What are you seeing, Eric?
Sure. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more tomorrow. I'll be doing my monthly outlook. So if you want to go to the Crop Watch page, the second Tuesday at 9 webinar will be up by sometime later tomorrow morning. But just in the immediate term, there's going to be chances of picking up moisture the next 2 weeks. This weekend offers some chances. There'll be chances probably at least a couple times next week. Next Tuesday, Wednesday looks relatively promising, especially the eastern side of the state. And then, if you look at most of them, like the CPC, a lot of indications are showing dry and warm favored. But there are some hints that the faucet may not be on real frequently, but it may not really ever fully shut off, at least not for the next 6 weeks. And I think that's important because if we can get timely rains, we may statistically be a little bit dry, but we may stave off the worst drought pressure. And I think if we can kick that drought can down the road in a meaningful way through at least the first part of August, that doesn't mean we're going to have optimal yields, but at least means that we're probably going to avoid a worst case scenario, which I think was certainly at the forefront of a lot of people's minds a month ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. Eric, what else is important to note about the week ahead or the coming weeks that we should be aware of?
Just that I think as we get later this week, I think we're going to start a period where we're going to be consistently, at least probably on the warm side. I don't see any major cool snaps coming in here for a little while after early this week.
All right, our weekly guest again, Eric Hunt with Nebraska Extension. Again, you can tune into his webinar that will be tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning. I'm Alex Makovica from inside the Nebraska Soybean Board Studios, brought to you by Nebraska soybean farmers and their checkoff. This is the Rural Radio Network.